They grew up on the same street, shared the same dreams, and promised they would always look out for each other. Mark and Daniel, two best friends who became something much more. Business partners, brothers in ambition. But what happens when trust turns into betrayal? When the person you die for is the one holding the knife? This is the story of how one night changed everything. He trusted his best friend until that night changed everything. They met when they were just 7. Mark was the curious one, always taking apart old radios, sketching wild ideas. Daniel was steady, strategic, the kind of kid who made every game into a competition. By high school, they were inseparable. They dreamed of building something together, something that would matter. When they graduated, they turned that dream into a reality, a tiny startup called Evolve Tech. At first, it was nothing, a garage, 2 laptops, and a lot of late nights. But they had something more powerful than money: trust. Mark handled the creative vision. Daniel handled the numbers. Together, they were unstoppable. Their friendship was built on loyalty, and for a while, it seemed unbreakable. Fast forward 5 years. Evolve Tech had exploded into one of the fastest growing startups in the country. Millions in funding, dozens of employees, new offices in downtown Seattle. Mark and Daniel were on magazine covers, podcasts, business panels. Everyone wanted to know, "What's your secret?" Mark always answered the same way. "It's simple. I trust my best friend." But trust can be blinding. Behind closed doors, things began to shift. Meetings were happening without Mark. Projects were being rerouted through Daniel. It started small, just business adjustments. But soon, Mark noticed something else. Emails that disappeared, contracts missing his signature, and new patents filed quietly under Daniel's name. When Mark asked about it, Daniel laughed. "Don't worry, man. It's just paperwork. You know how messy this stuff gets." Mark wanted to believe him. He needed to believe him because the alternative was unthinkable. They had built everything together. Why would Daniel betray him? Then came the rumors. Investors whispering that Daniel had been in private talks, that he was starting something new, alone. Mark brushed it off. He couldn't imagine Daniel doing that. Not him, not his friend. But deep down, something felt wrong. He started staying late at the office, checking the servers, reading through the files. And that's when he found it. A document folder, hidden, encrypted, labeled Evolve Group. Inside were drafts of a rebrand, a new logo, a list of investors. And at the top of the page, founder and CEO, Daniel Rice. Mark's hands were shaking. He called Daniel that night. "Hey, what is this?" he asked, voice trembling. Daniel's tone was cold. "Relax, man. You're overthinking again." Mark hung up. He didn't know it then, but that was the last time they'd ever speak as friends. December 17th, 2021. Evolve Tech's annual celebration, a night meant to celebrate success, teamwork, and friendship. Mark had written a heartfelt speech, thanking the team, the investors, and Daniel. He rehearsed it for days. When he stepped up to the stage, the lights dimmed. The crowd went quiet. He reached for the microphone. It didn't work. The room murmured. Then Daniel walked up beside him, took the mic, and smiled. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight marks a new beginning. From this day forward, I'll be leading the newly formed Evolve Group." Applause, cheers, confetti, and Mark just stood there, frozen. He looked around. His team, their team, was clapping, not realizing what had just happened. In one move, Daniel had rebranded the company, transferred assets, cut Mark out legally, and announced it publicly. The betrayal was complete, and everyone celebrated it without even knowing. The next morning, Mark's company accounts were locked, his email access revoked. The lawyer's letter arrived hours later. "Effective immediately, your partnership and stake in Evolve Tech have been dissolved." Daniel had done it all. Forged signatures, manipulated contracts, and rerouted ownership quietly over months. Mark was erased from his own creation. He sat in his apartment surrounded by boxes, trophies, old prototypes, photographs. He stared at a framed picture of him and Daniel smiling at their first office. That picture stayed on the floor for a long time. In just 48 hours, Mark lost everything he had built over a decade: money, business, reputation, and most painfully, his faith in people. Sometimes betrayal doesn't kill you. It just changes who you are. But Mark wasn't done. He couldn't be. He started digging, quietly, methodically, emails, bank records, contracts. He hired a private investigator, tracked shell companies, found offshore accounts tied to Daniel's name. 14 months of relentless work, until finally he had enough evidence. In March 2023, federal agents knocked on Daniel's door. He was charged with corporate fraud, identity forgery, and grand theft. Convicted, sentenced to 12 years in prison. Mark didn't get his company back, but he got something else: closure, truth, justice. He once said in an interview, "The worst thing about betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies." Mark now lives a quiet life outside Seattle. He mentors young entrepreneurs. He rarely talks about Daniel, but those who know him say that sometimes, when the subject comes up, he smiles faintly and says, "I forgave him, but I'll never forget." Because betrayal doesn't just break you, it rebuilds you differently. This was the story of trust, friendship, and the night everything changed. Subscribe to Betrayal Files USA for more true stories of loyalty, lies, and the shocking truth behind them.